I have a confession. I almost never shoot manual. Yo, what's going on, guys? My name is Ethan Shaw and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be talking about why I don't actually shoot manual and why I don't suggest for beginners to shoot manual either. Okay, so I do shoot manual whenever I'm in the studio or in controlled situations. But to be honest, when I'm running, gunning, street photography, anything else where I need my camera ready and consistent, I will always shoot on Aperture Priority. So Aperture Priority is definitely the best because you get to choose your aperture and the camera metering system will choose your shutter speed for you. So this will consistently deliver correctly exposed images. See, now why would you want to choose your aperture instead of your shutter speed? Your aperture will determine the sharpness of your image, how much of the image is in focus, and then also will let in the correct amount of light which you are going to choose. Okay, so for example, if you're going to shoot a portrait, let's say, you definitely want your aperture to be pretty fast, so say 2.8, 2.2, 1.8, and this will give you, the nice background blur, but also will increase your shutter speed as fast as possible so you don't have any motion blur. Now you're following along with where I'm getting at this. Okay, so one drawback with this method I will say is sometimes your metering system will screw up and will be off. Another drawback is if you get too comfortable with letting your camera choose your shutter speed for you, it might dip below what you actually want. So let's say you're shooting inside, you're shooting at f2.8 and then your shutter speed dips below, say, 1/60th of a second. Now you're getting some motion blur and not realizing it, and then looking back at your camera and all your photos are blurry. So let me show you how exactly I set up my camera to get the most out of Aperture Priority and get the most automation, so when I'm shooting it's always on point and where I want it. You definitely want to take a look at your metering systems, especially because your camera is going to be choosing your shutter speed for you. So in Canon cameras, we have four main metering systems. We have evaluative metering, you have partial metering, spot metering, and center weighted average metering. I personally use center weighted average metering because I find this is the best. Whatever is in the middle of your frame will be correctly exposed and it'll take sort of an average of whatever is in the middle. So now that you've chosen your favorite metering system, you can come over to the exposure setting and notch it down about one stop. This really depends on your camera. All cameras meter differently, but I find on the Canon cameras, the exact proper exposure sometimes blows out the highlights, especially if I have foreground elements. So by underexposing by one stop, you can bring it up in post if you're shooting RAW, and you'll have much more detail because you wouldn't have blown out those highlights, and you can still recover the shadows at almost perfect quality. Now, if you're shooting JPEGs or you're not editing your photos, you should probably just leave it right in the middle because that just gives it the best overall photo. But if you're shooting RAW, you can definitely have way more room to play with and you can bring up the shadows a lot better. So now that my exposure is on -1 stop and my metering system is all good to go, I can shoot, and generally I'll have about a stop or two to play with because I'm shooting RAW. And when I'm editing the photos, they'll all be good. I'll still have good highlights, I'll have good detailed shadows, and my midtones would be properly exposed so I can edit and change the image freely. So let me tell you why I love Aperture Priority so much. If you're in a family setting and you're just shooting and you're going inside and outside and back inside again, your lighting is constantly changing. So Aperture Priority will allow you to get the best photos in either condition. You can even set your ISO to auto, but I personally never do that because I want my ISO to be as low as possible until I start getting motion blur. And I'll watch the photos, and if I get motion blur, then I will bump up my ISO. So really, as long as you're watching out that your shutter speed isn't too low, you will always have the perfect exposure for your images, and you can definitely focus on actually focusing, composing, and telling your subject what to do instead of worrying about if you have the correct exposure for the image or not. Alright, so that's about it from me, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed my YouTube video. Make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. With that being said, have a great rest of your day and keep shooting.